Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. This is David.
I'm Nicole.
And we are absent of Reed today. Reed is celebrating his twins' 10th birthday.
Yeah, today actually. So happy birthday to Avery and Ella.
That's right. So I think they were actually supposed to go to New York originally. That was their selection for their...
Or San Diego, maybe?
No. I'm pretty sure it's New York because he was vying for Disney. Wasn't he vying for Disney? And they somehow chose New York for their birthday trip, but then COVID hit, and so now they can't do Disney or New York, and now they're stuck. I say stuck at the Broadmoor because they closed down like the bowling alley and the pool, and so they're basically in a really fancy hotel room.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about it.
Yeah. Well, anyways, so he's off doing that, but we have an episode to do on client experience, and this is obviously your world, VP of Client Services, and I'll say it seems like in the last. Well, I feel like 2 years, and maybe that's a convenient number, but I feel like you've been much more a student of this like world than I think prior. Meaning like before, you definitely were involved in, I'll say like support services, but I just feel like I've been hearing a lot more like content research and different things of that nature. And I don't know if that's more of like your interest or if that's more like there's a lot more in the industry, content being published and studied and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great resources out there. And I think as we've grown the team over the last 3 years, it's really important for me to not just kind of do what we've been doing or do what I think is best, is to really do some research to see what can we take from other companies that have been successful. What do best practices look like? Do we agree with those? And so that's been super important to me, is to really just kind of get under the hood on some of these other tech companies and how they've scaled their client experience team.
So if someone's listening to this and they haven't really heard client experience or customer experience before, give one example of why they may want to listen, like what is client or customer experience? And then I'm going to make you do a hot take.
So I think why you should listen to this podcast is we kind of talk about some examples of just brands and companies that have done it really well that we interact with in our personal lives, in our business lives, how we've kind of taken that and molded it into what our team currently does for client experience, but then also as a marketer, how you can better interact with your vendors and maybe kind of build a relationship and get more what you want out of them.
So my hot take question would be, is there a best practice within client experience or customer experience that you disagree with?
That is a great question. I think for us, one that we kind of debate on the episode is retention rate. I think that there's a lot of companies that put a lot of value on retention rate. And I do too. I agree with it as a metric. I mean, my team tracks it every week. But we get into how that can be a lagging indicator and how you really need to start tracking leading indicators for success when it comes to your clients. So not that I disagree with it. I just think that a lot of companies put a lot of weight into it and it doesn't tell the whole picture.
I like it. I will tack on to that and say like CSAT scores, like customer satisfaction scores.
Yeah, or NPS surveys.
NPS surveys. I am not a huge fan. I mean, I get the point of NPS, but I feel that it's just flawed in many ways. And I feel a lot of companies put too much value on an NPS score. And we talk about this in the episode about having a North Star metric. And I feel like a lot of companies go after that. And there is good to that, but if you don't really dive too much into the underlying, aspects of it, I think it can misguide you on what's important. I will also say this: I have a great example of an NPS score. So Madison Square Garden, they are the most popular event company in the world, or whatever. I think they did more. I think it was last year they did something like 1 million ticket sales for 2019. And their NPS score was not too hot, like in the middle of last year when they were like, just all these concert events and whatever. And the reason was because for one particular event, they had this one band that, I almost want to make fun of Adam. What's Adam's band that he goes to?
Jimmy Buffett.
Jimmy Buffett. And they had this one band similar to Jimmy Buffett where people will come to multiple shows at a time, like in a row. And so the band had rented out the MSG for a whole week, and there's a different show every night, and people come back to multiple shows, and they were tracking their NPS score. And it's this is a very energetic band. People are like, dancing, jiving, whatever to it. And their NPS scores at the beginning of the week were very low, because what people were complaining about is like, I'm out there in the mosh pit and I'm going at it. And you guys won't let me take my water bottle cap with me. Like when I buy water from you, you keep the cap, because there's this thing where like people used to throw water bottle caps like at basketball games down onto the court, and it would cause a problem. So it was their standard to just not provide water bottle caps. But these people are like, I'm going down on the floor and I need to be able to dance and I need to be able to cover my water bottle. And so they saw that on Monday and Tuesday, had very low scores. And so by Wednesday, they flipped. They said, okay, for this particular band and event, we are going to let you keep the cap. And their NPS score the rest of that week jumped up 20 points. So that's a positive measure about NPS. But I'm going to say, for my hot take, NPS is not always a good thing. Sometimes you're measuring the wrong things, and you can like in that case, like let's say if it was during a basketball game, you may still decide like we gotta, we just can't let people throw caps at the players. So we're still not going to give them. You can't over adjust to it.
Yeah, flexibility within the framework.
Oh, that's why you were smirking at me.
No, I was smirking because it was so random, but I see where you're going.
What, don't you think? I thought that was a great
good.
story.
It's good.
Proud of it. Thank you. Well, anything else why they may listen to this episode or should care?
You'll hear Lucy snoring in the background, our French bulldog, and then you'll also hear our Roomba vacuum go off. So definitely some work from home interruptions today.
DJ Roomba.
Sorry.
All right, Nicole. Usually we, meaning Reed and I, are the ones that are trying to get you to jump on a podcast, and you're resistant. I don't think that's too much of a secret. But This is the first podcast I feel like you've suggested like we should do one on this. So now you're here.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm excited. I think we've been talking a lot internally about client experience, which obviously is near and dear to my heart. It's my world. And we've had a lot of good ideas lately on how we're innovating within the space, but then also I think a lot of ideas that can relate back to how our clients can help their residents. So I think it's perfect timing.
And when you say within the space, how large does that go? You say innovating within the space.
Yeah, I mean, our world, obviously multifamily marketing, but I think a lot of what we're doing applies broader to digital marketing at large.
Okay. So I think you have an icebreaker question before I take us off track.
Yeah, I know you're going to take us off track eventually. I used to ask this. I'm actually going to bring it back on all my interviews. So my icebreaker question is, what is a brand or company that you've had such a good experience about or with that you talk about it to your family or friends, or that has really stuck with you?
So I prepped a little bit more because you asked me this question first, and it was actually tough. And I don't know if this is because of quarantine that I feel like I'm not having as many experiences as I used to, but I had to think back a little ways, and I've got both consumer experiences and I guess more business experiences, because I know we want to get into that. So we want to hit both sides. I think that's the goal here, is to hit both sides.
Yeah, I think just starting out, it can be anything. And then there are certain things within that can be applicable to business, but then also the consumer side. Okay.
So my first two, I'll start with consumer. One of them is Microsoft, which I almost feel guilty saying it.
Very surprised by this.
It's not cool to say, but I have a Microsoft Surface machine, and we'll just go ahead and get off track now, and I'll tell the story. But I built, as you know, I wanted to do some heat training for home, heat training, meaning for athletic. I think you have to define this a little bit more, because I didn't really know the benefits of this. So again, not to get too off track, but I don't think you can just throw out heat training and not give a quick explanation. Okay. Well, I run, right? I'm a runner. And in the summertime, there's often a lot of folks that move into heat training. So you go train at the hottest part of the day. so that it helps increase your blood volume, which makes it easier to move oxygen around the body. And so what I've noticed for me is specifically if less about running in hot weather, but if I just do some sauna work, like if I just jump into the sauna for like 30 minutes or an hour, a couple times a week, then I see a massive increase in my running. So with quarantine, we don't have access to saunas. So I built a ghetto one, as you're now aware, in the garage. It's sort of embarrassing, but it's basically like a marijuana grow tent with all these like lights all over that place that heat the inside to like 100, heck, I don't know, 180, 190 degrees. But I thought I would knock out two birds with one stone and do my client emails in the sauna one night late after work. And I ended up basically frying my machine, my Microsoft Surface machine. So we traveled down to the Microsoft store, told them like, hey, I'm having a problem. Here's what's happening with it. It's causing these weird Zoom issues. And Microsoft was like, shoot, you're 3 months out of warranty, but I can tell this is totally an issue. So here's a new one. And I walked into the store, and within, I think it was like under 15 minutes, they gave me a new machine and I was out of there.
I remember that.
Yeah. So I was blown away by that. Also, I didn't learn my lesson because I took that brand new machine right back into the sauna and I fried my machine again. And they warned me, like, since I'm out of warranty and we're doing this a favor, we're not going to replace the next one. And of course I did it again because I was like, it wouldn't have been the sauna, but it was totally the sauna. So now I need to buy a machine. But Microsoft really impressed me because I was out of warranty, less than 15 minutes, got a whole new machine. Bada bing, bada boom, done.
And this is usually the case, I think, with most of the stories, at least that I've heard when I asked this question. But how much of that was the rep that you dealt with versus the Microsoft policy?
Well, it wasn't their policy to replace it because I was beyond policy. So definitely cared for the rep. But I guess the fact that Microsoft will replace a machine at all I walked in there and I had a quick like Zoom recording from when it had like skitzed out on me. And I, that's all I did was show them that and they were like, done. But again, I guess I could have been the rep, but he made it easy. So
right.
Definitely, I guess, I don't know how much to attribute to the rep or Microsoft, but I'll say probably the rep had a lot to do with it because he, went a little bit beyond what he was supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of my examples, I think I can either kind of pinpoint my good experience was based on the person I was dealing with or the automation that the company has put in place to make my life very easy. So I always like to kind of get into that.
Give me an example then of one that you have with the automation versus just hiring great people.
Yeah, I think on my list on more of a consumer-based, larger scale is Peloton. As you know, I'm obsessed with Peloton.
I wouldn't say that. I'm about to beat you on the number of rides I've done.
Maybe rides, but I don't think you can touch my strength sessions.
Well, no, I don't want to.
But they've made the app so easy to use. And I think the automation they've built to like push out reminders, to basically push out updates on like your weekly workout streak, things like that makes me come back more and more to the app and to the platform. And so while that's not like, I would say, great customer service, I'm not dealing with someone directly. I think it makes me interact with the platform more because of the automated touch points that they've built in.
So that's more, and Reed's not here because he's on vacation right now, but that's more Reed's gamification that's doing that for you. But
yeah, the gamification and the push notifications.
Yeah, because that does roll into, as you're saying, client experience. So now that you've hit me, obviously, with the icebreaker question, and we can hit more later on, but just help define client experience to me and what is encompassed with that.
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to get into today, because I think when you hear the term client experience or just experience in general, I think it can feel just very broad. So I think for me, the way I think about client experience is just what is the overall process, branding that you go through with a company that really helps you interact with the product that they're offering. So what makes you come back for more? What is the overall experience you get from working with a company? Yeah,
and I know, in fact, we should probably do another episode already and include Lurch on this, because client experience is also in the data world abbreviated as CX. And there's entire platforms now like Qualtrics and whatnot to help get at that at scale. Kind of, I'm sure, what Peloton is doing, right?
Right.
Versus when it's more of a mom and pop, which fact, I'll let you give that, but you have an example of a mom and pop business that you feel strongly about is doing a good job. And I think that's going to relate to
I mean, mom and pop, but also tied to a national brand. So I think when you and I were talking about this earlier, a local company that sticks out to me is Pure Barre Littleton. So I guess I'm on this fitness kick because all my examples are fitness related. But I've been to a few different Pure Barre locations, and the Littleton location, I feel like really, really goes above and beyond to give you that personalized service. And that really, to me, is all about the people. Like people are just outstanding at really getting at what you need, making you interact with the program, and just really kind of staying in front of you, where I don't think some national brands do that really well at scale.
Right. Well, obviously we can already think of a lot of connectivity on what you just described when it comes to an apartment building. Right. Because I don't know if you were on that Seattle trip, but we were touring some apartments in Seattle, and it was clear the property managers and leasing agents that really cared versus the ones that didn't.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to hit that at all. But basically, like the leasing agents that just were kind of obsessed with the property, that had been there for a while, made an incredible impact on at least how I was experiencing each property. Even if it didn't seem like a special property to me when I walked in, they started to make it feel special to me because of the sales process.
I absolutely remember that trip. And I think at the end of it, there was 4 of us that toured the property, and we were all like, can we move in here? Like, just because of John, the property manager. He went so above and beyond to give us the history of the building, really walk us through the thought process behind the 2 sides. Like, remember, there was the historical side and then the renovated side.
Right.
And I feel like that experience was so unique compared to other properties we've toured.
Right. Because other properties will show up and the leasing agent will be like, well, what do you want to see? I'm like, I don't know. You tell me what I want to see.
Right.
Like, you should know. And there's no like fact finding really, at least. And I know we're not a typical like prospect of theirs, but John, it didn't even matter that we weren't a typical prospect. He just he was so passionate about it. Like, he gave us that experience versus, other folks where it's like, well, do you want to see the pool? It's like, well, wouldn't I want to see the pool? So customer experience, why does it matter? Do you want me to answer this, or meaning I'm asking the question, client experience, customer experience, probably to me, it's the same thing, but why do we care? Why did you want to talk about this today?
I think it's so important because it's how your clients interact with your company and your brand. And I think that's why people buy from you. I think everything can be related back to that experience and the level of service they get. So there's obviously so much that goes into what we offer as a company. But at the end of the day, I feel like what our clients experience by working with us is what sets us apart. Okay.
Well, I'll say we just did an interview with the ownership asset management company Origin. And what they were saying is, well, a lot of people don't think about the entire customer journey. And to me, this is what it is, right? Like from the first time they see your ad to the first time they land on your website to the first time they talk to somebody, the leasing process, moving in and living there. That to me is everything with the customer experience, right? Client experience. And that would, I'm just spitballing here, but I think that's going to impact their loyalty, and which would mean their lifetime value, right? Of someone, the referral opportunities, right? Like, are they going to recommend you to other folks? Because a stat that I've had for years is that it's somewhere 70 to 80% of new clients are from referrals.
I think that's great. I also think what we've kind of talked about too as a company is the unsolicited referral. So it's one thing if you're asking your clients for referrals of their network, but I think what is a true measure of that great experience is when you get unsolicited referrals from your clients.
Right. Cool. Well, where do you want to go next? So we've hit obviously a little bit of what client experience is, touched on a little bit about the apartment buyer's journey, let's say. I know obviously in your position, you're thinking a lot about our own clients' experiences. So do you want to go there next, or should we go a different angle?
I think maybe helping define client experience a little bit more, like what are the buckets that go into it and how can we kind of make it a little bit more concrete for those listening.
Okay. Hit me.
All right. So I think when you think overall about client experience, there's a few things you have to consider. One being the quality of the product. So what does that look like? How does a product set itself apart? And then 2 being price. So those are the first 2 things, product and price, that I kind of orient around when thinking about experience.
So I'm going to also say like positioning and packaging. And I know
Brand.
Yeah. I obviously have a lot of tech thoughts on the mind with that, because it's simply the way that you introduce your price. And I'll give a great example, but or what I think is a great example, self-declared. I was listening to, we really like some of the content from the company Profitwell, and they're a company that's all about pricing. And one example that their founder, Patrick Campbell gave was like most companies, if you have multiple price tiers, you kind of go from lowest to highest. And there are times that you want to flip-flop that and show the highest price first and then go to lowest. And a good example might be if you have a kind of tech that requires a lot of service, like, hey, if you're a newbie and you're going to use this product, you really need to be, if you're not an expert, you need to pay for the highest end because you need the most support. But if you're like, a rock star, then you would pay for the lowest because you already know how to use this tool. And so I'll equate that a little bit to Fiona, but like, if you think about Fiona, if you're like wicked great at digital marketing, you've been doing it for years, you're super techie already, maybe you just need like the lowest version of Fiona. Versus if you're a company that hasn't gotten as much, as deep into it, then Fiona gives you more service when you're on the higher end packages. And so thus you may want to put like the higher price first and then the lower price last. So that's what I'm saying about packaging and pricing. I see you looking a little bit sideways. So I
totally agree with you, because I think there's some examples that you didn't get to that we've talked about earlier that kind of scale that way. So like Apollo is a great example for you, which is basically a sales tool automation platform that allows you to automate outreach. And I think I've been on a few of those calls with you with Christian. Is that his name?
Yeah.
From Apollo, and he really made the platform for us. I think that he took so much time to kind of walk us through things, explain things, give us feedback on the sequences that you had set up, have you tweak your language. And that is a totally great example of how like you would pay for that support. So yes. I totally agree with you. We were newer to the platform. We wanted to pay more for that premium support level. And I think that could be where Fiona goes.
Yeah, it's a great example. So the thing at the time, actually, it's funny, now they have a much lower package. At the time, if I was given the option for the lower package versus the higher package, I would have done the lower package, because I would, as a consumer or whatever, as a possible user, I'd be like, well, I don't know if this is going to work. It sounds great, but let me test it. And that's kind of Patrick's point from Profitwell, is that if you really need hand-holding to get the value out of this and learn it, then you want to try to convince the person, like, use the higher end package first, and then we'll, downgrade you to the lower package once you're trained up. But I even think about Salesforce. Like, we're on Salesforce as a company, and they offer like the upgraded like service tier. But my first thought was like, let's see if we can get by without it. It wasn't that it was baked in. So that goes back to pricing and positioning. So that was your first thing, was pricing. I'll say packaging. You were saying like the product overall. What else is included here in client experience?
I think the support that you have. So I think we've broken that up into like kind of what falls under that. What makes a good support experience is really insight and knowledge of the person that you're working with. And then their overall responsiveness, I think, is huge.
So there's a lot that goes underneath that, but that would be like, do you get the same person every time?
Right.
Do you get, obviously different people? Do they have any context around you? Are you calling basically a ticket system, or can you even get on the phone with somebody?
Right.
And then obviously, as you're saying, like the responsiveness, because these days, like almost everybody has a chat widget on their website.
I was going to say, I think some tech has really disrupted that space in a great way. Like if I am interacting with a chat bot on a site and they're fast to respond, I'm all about it.
Right. And that's one of your examples. So now I'll give you, but we have a tool that we use internally for managing, but Lead Honestly, where it basically takes pulse checks of every employee each week to see if they're happy or not happy and productive or not productive, that type of thing. And you were saying that your experience with their support has been A+.
Yeah, that was one of my business examples. I think they're super responsive. They're willing to jump in, and then their like turnaround time to actually fix the problems that I have, it's been like same day, which is super quick. So I've been really happy with their support system.
Whereas it can also go, the problem with that disruption is it can go the opposite way. So if you add a chatbot on your website, and now if someone takes like, if basically I have to leave the tab and do something else because I'm waiting on you, now it's no longer a good experience for me. Like personally, if it's like I'm waiting 10 minutes for you to start the conversation with me, it's as if I'm like in a holding pattern. And then it's like I get tied up in something else, and then I hear the ding or whatever that you finally got to me, and I'm like, well, I'm busy on this other thing.
Well, not to get too into chatbots, because I think I think you and I have talked a lot about them. I think it depends on, is it a scripted chatbot or is it an actual support ticketing person? Because that really affects the experience. If it's someone that is like responding to you in real time, I think that's different than if you're just being put through a script.
Right. Well, the script would be automated, so then you get the quick response, right? So really, am I wrong?
Well, not with Lead Honestly, at least. Like it's a real person that responds, and then they are the actual ones fixing your problem. And then to your point, like if they notice that you click into another tab, they send you an email, which has really gotten me. But I also live out of my email, so I know that doesn't work for some people.
Are you saying for the script, like even if you have a human that's basically just using a script, copy pasting, then that's when it's problematic? Or are you saying the bot script?
The canned scripts where it's like not custom to what you're actually asking, and they're like, oh, we actually need more information. What is your email address? It's like, well, you should. Yeah.
Well, I guess on some of that, back to it, like also going back to an apartment, to make a quick connection, if they add a bot on the website, to me, response time has to be under. And in fact, we looked at this, frankly, with Fiona, like, should we put a live support on the site? And we were advised not to, because they said it's a sort of like reviews. Like if you take longer than an average of 8 minutes to respond, it's worse to have the chat bot or the chat.
8 minutes. I was going to say like 30 seconds.
That's how I felt, but I just remember 8 minutes. That's what they were advising at the time. Wow. I frankly, as a user, I feel like I want underneath.
I would never wait 8 minutes.
Yeah, but
I wouldn't wait 5 minutes.
Yeah, I do like how a lot of these systems now say usually it takes 5 minutes to respond, because now my expectations are set. But back to it, it's like if you don't have someone that can manage that chat system in real time, basically, don't do it. But if it is real time, people get impressed because it's so unusual. So then I would just kill it from the system. Or you can do a bot that's like, it's obvious it's a bot. It's not trying to fake being a human. And then it's like, great, I could answer some of this, but not all of this. And we'll get you to a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but sticking on a responsiveness for a minute here, I think we kind of got a little bit off track with the chatbots. But when you're dealing with a dedicated rep, that's super important. So like our internal SLA for response time is within 24 hours. And usually it's same day, even if that response is like, hey, we're looking into this, we acknowledge, this request. So I think that is really helpful when you know that you have someone who is going to do their best to get back to you as soon as possible.
So why set 24 hours? What's the thought behind that SLA?
I think most of the requests that we get can be handled within 24 hours. And so I think the nature of multifamily marketing is that there's a lot of fire drills that happen. And so we're constantly getting hit, I think, based on our clients and maybe ownership, pinging them for immediate requests. And so we try to have a same day, if not, the next day turnaround time.
And what are your expectations as a customer of other vendors? Do you think having do you ask them about what's your turnaround time, or is it like a deal breaker if it's more than 24 hours? Like I want to dig more into that part of the experience.
Yeah, I think it's super important for that acknowledged piece. So I know when I'm dealing with other vendors, I don't expect them to get me, my request immediately, but I expect to have a confirmation of receipt that my request has been heard. And so I think that's what's really important, is just having someone respond to say, great, got it. And then setting my expectation. So if they can't get it back to me when I need it, really kind of going into that and say, I can get this to you by end of week or whatever it may be.
Right. So that's actually something that we just teach, like as a professionalism within the company, right? Like I know, at least on my team, we, when we set expectations, we say that it's like, if someone asks you for something, say message received, and then give them an estimated time that you're going to have it. And then if you're not going to meet that, let them know in advance, like, okay, there's something that's holding me up. We're not going to make it on time. Don't let it be a surprise. So I would also say, now moving back to personally, if I get an automated, like, your concern is important to us, we have received this and it's in our box, that doesn't work for me. Meaning, I guess that's fine if I filled out a web form. I want to know that they got it. But what I'm more saying is, I don't like, I would rather have what you said, a dedicated rep that says, I got this, I'll get back to you.
And I think that applies to, your consumer experience and property management as well. Like, I know I had a really great experience with the property manager in my building when I was in my apartment before ownership group changed. And they were great. Like, they would always set expectations of like, hey, here's when I'm going to be in the office, swing by, or like, hey, I'm out, come by tomorrow, whatever it was. They were just super responsive.
Yeah. So 24 hours, it's funny. We get a lot of compliments from clients on how darn responsive we are. And they say, like, shoot, we'll work with you because you get back to us so fast, which to me, I feel like it's the best kept secret that we're now publicizing to millions and millions of fans on this podcast. No, but really, like, I feel like the bar is so low because, to your point, when and I'll do my air quotes as Reed hazes me or razzes me for every episode, but it's like to innovate in the space is like, respond in less than 24 hours. How low of a bar is that?
Right.
but it works. So is there more that you want to go into with, at least on the responsive side of things when it comes to service?
Not on the responsiveness, but I think the other point that I always think about is just almost insight and thoughtfulness of the service that you're getting. So it's almost like you said on a call the other day, like garbage in, garbage out. And so I think about that in terms of like, what are we providing clients? Like, is it meaningful? Like, are we just giving them a canned response because no one wants to get that? Yeah. Like, are we really being thoughtful, digging into the data, giving them an out of the box solution or response or something that's just, what they're not going to get from other vendors? And so I think the kind of the insight piece is huge for us.
And I was saying garbage in, garbage out for my diet.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
and you related on data, like when it comes to data, that was what the call was about.
On my diet for a minute, like how, this is more, I'll go back to running for a minute, but I love my Sonic cheeseburgers in the morning, and I feel like I run better when I have a cheeseburger. Or as Lurch our chief data officer will say, anytime after we have Moe's barbecue, like the brisket sandwich, I run amazing. And so I almost feel like garbage in, garbage out. I flip on its head. Garbage in, run awesome.
Okay, new thing.
Well, you remember, like, remember back when you were marathon training and you had pizza rolls?
Yeah, pizza rolls are delicious. It's a good mix on a long run.
Yeah. See, there you go. It's not always garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess the last thing on responsiveness, at least to tie it back to apartments for a minute, from what we've seen with our data is that the average apartment searcher will look at 6 to 8 apartments in one session when they're navigating online. And so that means if they land on an ILS or something of that nature, they will typically submit 6 to 8 guest cards when they're surfing through the ILS in one session. And so if an apartment, like leasing agents' turnaround time is 24 hours, they may be SOL because they're competing with 6 other apartments that may have already responded to the lead and set up tours. And most folks don't like to tour more than 3 apartments. So if you're like apartment number 4 to set up the tour, you're kind of hosed, right? And so the expectation turnaround time is much worse. Like your leasing agents need to be very much on top of their response rate and really keep it underneath an hour.
Yeah, I think that goes into like SLAs. You have, your baseline SLA, which generally speaking, let's say is 24 hours, but then you need to have your tiered approach based on your knowledge and experience of the client. So I won't use names, but we have, hey, we respond within 24 hours. There are certain clients where that turnaround time is an hour. And we've pushed that envelope because we know like, hey, this is super important to them. They've got a lot going on. And so we are going to respond faster. And so I think you have this for us, we have these almost this playbook of like, hey, here's what success looks like. But then each of our account managers kind of has to make that their own based on how they know that their client works.
Well, let me push you there then? Why? So many companies have tiered service where it's like, silver, gold, platinum tier, right? And platinum tier gets the best service, if you will, right? We have decidedly as a company not done tiered service levels.
Yep.
Our reasoning for that, and you can tack on here, is for if I'm just imagining the life of an account manager, it's hard to, like, if I get a phone call from someone, I don't want to have to tell them like, you're not a platinum tier, I'll get back to you later, right? Like that's a terrible client experience. Better client experience is like, you called me because this is an emergency, so we're picking up the phone, right?
Totally.
And then on emails, there's a little bit of email triage where, as just putting myself in your team's shoes, where I look through the urgent matters and it's like, let me handle those first because that's the fire, versus if a campaign is starting a month from now, I'll get back to you within the 24 hours, but not in under half an hour.
Right.
So when you say there's some clients that you've had to, like, you guys are trying to be closer to an hour response time, what's causing that?
I think for us, we try to base everything we do off of our core values. And one of our core values is that I'm kind of connecting this to is both authenticity and curiosity. And for us, curiosity is really digging into the client's workload, the client's team structure, understanding what's important to them, what their pain points are, what their watch list properties are. And that helps us structure how we're going to support them better. So I think if we know, like, we got hit with an email that seemed super urgent, client is walking into their weekly Monday meeting, that email is going to take priority because we've had that kind of deep dive and we know what's important to the client. So while it's not these tiered approaches, which I agree with you, we have been on teams where we did have that team approach, and you do end up just treating everyone either similar, or then you have this no mentality, which I personally hate. So we don't have that tiered approach. We do have custom approaches based on what's important to our clients.
But isn't your team, and I'm smirking because Reed would get this joke, but your team's a bunch of 110%ers, right?
I feel like this question is a trap.
Don't you remember that from your old, I won't name names this time, but your old boss? And he was always
I didn't connect it. No,
he was always like, my team's a bunch of 110%ers. And Reed hated it because he was like, it just really burned his hide.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I do think personality plays into it. And I think to be successful in any type of, service role, you have to have a personality that to some extent you want to help, you're a helper and you want to please. And so, maybe we will get into a sidetrack on like Crystal knows and like team personalities, but a lot of my team, we've taken kind of a personality assessment and we're all different, but similar, like within the same sphere of the grid, I guess. And so I think that's just a natural instinct, like to be successful is like, you want to be quick, you want to please, you want to like help people. And so I think naturally that means like being quicker on a response time.
Right. So if I, again, relate this point back to an apartment marketer, for them, they may say they can understand because they may have that one ownership group and that one hot property that just keeps popping up. And if they see an email come through for that, they would probably put that in front of others, right? So you're basically, even though someone's not paying a difference for the tier of service, it's more like if there is a sore spot somewhere, that's where the time compression happens versus otherwise, which is, frankly, I know hotel companies constantly get hit for like how great they are around hospitality and like how the Ritz will move your trash can around because they know where you like it and they keep track of that when you move it every time in the room. That personalized service is great. I would want the same as if I'm a client, personalized service on like, look, know what my hot button is and get back to that quickly versus my stuff that can kind of wait.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, what you got next?
We talked a little bit about like how we can improve the experience for residents, but do you want to kind of stick on that or have anything else to add there?
Around residents? Well, I feel like we could do a whole show. In fact, we probably should. We should get we should do one with Elaine and have her on to talk through the leasing agent's experience and what they should do better. I would say, like, if anything, back to low expectations. And from what I've seen from the outside looking in, leasing agents don't really often see their job as sales.
Right.
When in fact, that's exactly what they are. right? They're the salespeople, but they're dealing with all these other current customers. So I have a quick story that ties to this, but what's more important? And so I'll ask you this question: current clients or new clients?
I'm going to have to say current clients.
Ooh, give your reasoning.
Well, you kind of hit on this in, I guess, the setup for that. But I think whoever is interacting with your clients is the face of your company. So while a customer service rep, that's their job, they have this team behind them, they're the one that is really leading that experience with the client. And I think for us, doing that well has led to referral business. And so I think if you don't have a good relationship with your current clients, how do you expect to get new clients?
Right. So let me give the counter argument, and then I'll tell you with what I agree with. But have I told you the story about PayPal?
I don't think so.
So PayPal, they're now the founders of PayPal. The executives there are now called the PayPal Mafia, because after they sold the company, they've all gone on to do great things. Like you have Reid Hoffman, who founded LinkedIn. You have Elon Musk, obviously, that's at Tesla. You just have all of these great entrepreneurs. Well, when they were growing when they were growing PayPal, I remember this because I was one of the year one PayPal customers for my first startup. And you could not, it's like Google or Facebook now, you could not get anybody on the phone. And their reasoning at the time was, look, we are growing so damn fast because there's no other way to, your other alternative, if you're doing business on eBay, is mailing a check and waiting 7 days for that to get there and then it to clear, and then your Beanie Baby gets sent, right? But PayPal made it where it was effectively instant, right? That you can take money. And so they were such a better option than the alternative, that they were just growing like crazy. So much so that they had 2 customer service reps in the entire company, and they were at an email deficit of 10,000 emails a month. So every month there were 10,000 more support requests than they could get to. And so after 2 months, there's 20,000, then 30,000, 40,000. And they made a decision as a company. They're like, that's how it's going to be, because there's nowhere else these customers can go right now. And we'll eventually solve this problem all at once, but it's too much to try to fix it right now. And eventually they got to a point where people started calling their phones, and people found their phone number and they started just dialing every extension, where every phone was ringing constantly during the day. And so they ended up unplugging all their office phones and using cell phones for business. And then they started having people show up at their office address saying, hey, you got to help me. Like there was a dude that drove from Vegas to California just to knock on their door and say, like, you got to solve my support ticket problem. And they still didn't do anything, because their thought was, we just have to get all these new customers in the door and addicted. And then one day, basically like a year into this problem, they solved it all at once by hiring a 200-person telephone center. And it was then all of a sudden, within 3 weeks of hiring that, they were done. Support requests were answered in under 24 hours. But it wasn't until the fire got big enough that they decided, like, let's solve this at once. So if you take that reasoning, then you're like, okay, well, that makes sense for, let's say, a fast growing startup if you have other things that you're worried about. So in that case, maybe you would apply a similar rationale, let's say, to a lease up, right? Is it more important to deal with the 7 people that are currently living at the building, or more important to deal with all of these possible leads to get them in the door, where you're not as worried about churn because those 7 people are stuck in a 12-month lease, right? Versus a current stabilized building.
Yeah, well, I think on that example, to your point, it's all about what is important to you and what retention looks like. So the PayPal example, if there's no competitors, that's a different story. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not the world we're living in, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, digital marketing vendors are kind of a dime per dozen.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on what is the market, what's the vertical that you're in, what's important to you. And in the lease up scenario, I could still argue that those 7 tenants are important, because I think we have data that shows people make a decision on whether they're renewing within, is it 3 months? Like the first 3 months.
Moving in.
And we also have data that it's lease or less expensive for a building to retain their residents than to churn and file for new residents. So, which also is not common practice. I think most companies are more focused on, getting new tenants in the building than retaining their current residents.
Right. It's a constant gripe, frankly, that marketing doesn't focus on retention at all. They only work on the new stuff, and that's a problem. I do agree with you. Also, the reputation that you build, you're a brand new building, you have 7 people living there and you get like 1-star reviews. That's not a good look. But I'm just saying, like, there are counterpoints to this because if you focus too much on who lives there now, then you would never get the new leads that come in, right?
Totally. I think it depends too, like what I think we see that a lot in tech companies and the different podcasts that you and I listen to, where it's like, especially if you're venture backed, all they care about is growth. Mm-hmm. And so if you're responsible for showing X amount of growth month over month, then yes, your KPI is going to be new growth versus retention.
Right. Yeah. And that's another, people really enjoy having one North Star metric that you always go after, but you're right. For many companies, it's the growth number and they don't look at the churn number.
Yep.
And then at some point they're like, oh shoot, like we have a churn problem.
Yeah. And I think that's hard for any company to have. Like, I like the concept of that, of having one North Star number. But I think in practice, it's hard because it doesn't tell the whole story. So like for us, we track retention rate, which you think would be, a solid metric. But then once you dive into it, there's so much more that goes into that number that you want to track. So we're also tracking like customer health. So like, where is our gut on this customer? How are they feeling with us? What is our response time? What is the KPIs and SLAs that we're hitting? Like all of this goes into that customer health number. And so I think if we were to just say we're just going to track retention, that's a lagging indicator versus something that's leading that could help us prevent future churn.
Yeah. Well, I love that concept. So I'm with you. North Star, not always the best, but it is good to have something to go towards, right?
Yep.
You don't want nothing.
Totally.
So if you had to choose along this client experience path, one thing to pay attention to, what would be your North Star?
I would say I probably need 3 things to pay attention to. Retention rate, customer health, and then overall growth. And that is a good metric for us because that really tells us, that kind of leads into customer health for us because most of our business is referral based. And so if we're not tracking that growth and we're just tracking like current clients retained, that's not kind of telling the whole story of how we're doing as a company.
Right. And customer health, as you were just saying, is a consolidation of many other metrics.
Yeah, 5 to 6 things that go into that.
And so the point of that is to basically be one of those standard metrics. If all you could pay attention to was that, you would pay attention to there, right? Because back to retention, if you're looking at net retention or versus like logo churn, you're really concerned about, seasonality can play a huge impact there. All right, cool. So should we talk about like what someone's expectations should be? Like when I know we keep talking a little bit more about like the apartment renter's journey, but I'm trying to give more actionable, I guess, for the marketer that may be listening or the owner, like how they should be thinking about their experience with vendors. Or maybe I should just ask, if you're not having a great experience, is there anything you can really do about that?
Yeah, I would say that you as the marketer have to take an active role in the relationship. I think being really transparent about what your expectations are really helps the vendor know, okay, here's how I'm going to be successful. Because if you don't say anything, they might have, like I mentioned, kind of a baseline playbook. They might have a current playbook that they use for all clients that may not meet your expectations. So I think being very transparent about what you need, what you're looking for, when you're expecting it, can help those relationships and help that vendor meet your expectations.
Okay. And obviously better to set that earlier on in the relationship.
Earlier on, but I think also as the marketer, there might be things that you don't know that you want yet. So like maybe you're just getting into working with this vendor. You've got your monthly call set up. They're going great. Maybe you don't realize like you're actually wanting more communication. Maybe you're wanting a weekly call. And then you start internally getting mad that you never hear from them, but without realizing it. So I think as much as you can early on is good. But what we've found too is like those needs are going to change and they might evolve. So maybe this has happened to us where it's like early on, client wants a weekly call. And then 3 months in, they're like, hey, we actually don't need to do this call anymore. So let's not do it just to do it. Let's make sure we're growing together as a partnership. Right.
Also, I know Lucy was on the podcast, our French Bulldog, before, but I feel like she's really sawing some logs.
She just started snoring behind you, so we might hear her.
At least it's better than that time she threw up on the podcast.
Yeah, she's a regular.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I think the thing that one of the things we love about this industry is that our customers are just so sweet. Like they're very kind people. They seem to care about, frankly, even us as a vendor, right? And yet they don't want to be a bother.
Right.
But it's actually, I guess I would advocate what you're saying. It's better for everybody involved if they can, just be more clear with expectations, particularly as those change. And another example to me would be reporting. I know last year you guys had more reporting templates than you had customers.
Yeah.
Because you had so
hundreds and hundreds.
Right. And, now you guys have narrowed that down, but a lot of that is because clients would ask to customize report A, B, or C. You guys would do it. And then at some point they wouldn't need it anymore, but you guys would still spend time doing the work there when you could be doing things elsewhere. So now back to client experience, part of your guys' process now is having check-ins with clients now and again saying, do you still want this weekly call? Do you still want this? Not to try to shove work off, but more just to say, like, there's only so many hours in the day. Everyone understands that.
Right.
I could better spend these elsewhere if you're not finding this valuable.
And I think almost questioning the why. So I think for us, we got into that pickle where we were customizing reports for every client, every property, because someone asked for, hey, I need to see this metric on a report. And then we started really digging in and saying, okay, we can do that, but let's talk about why we want to see this metric. And once we got into it, we realized there's another way we can get at that that's more valuable, that actually applies to maybe all of our campaigns. So questioning kind of the why behind the ask to make sure, like, yes, this is something that is actually valuable, or is this something that, ownership group heard about Google Analytics session duration, which is a terrible example because I do think that's a valuable metric, but did they just hear about a metric and now, they're asking to see it on the report?
Personalized website messaging. We briefly hit that on the Origin podcast as well, but that's something that's super cool and techie, but also it's like most of these websites load in 5 seconds anyways. So meaning fix your website speed first, and then we can talk about trying to do personalized user experiences on each website.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what else? Is there anything else you want to hit regarding customer experience?
I can talk about it all day. So what else do you think is valuable?
Well, I guess maybe you said you kind of made a plea, like if you're whoever your vendors are, just it's healthy. The vendor should be asking you for your expectations, but it's good for you just to speak up as well. Are there any other, I guess, like tips or things you would recommend for how folks should be engaging more with or differently with their vendors, or what? How can they help their own client experience even further with their vendor?
I would say real life examples and experience. So I know some of the most beneficial conversations we've had on how we can tailor our approach with certain clients is having them walk us through what their pain points are. And when I say that, I mean, actually on a Zoom call, share your screen. Here's, show me how you're pulling this report. How can I make this easier for you? Show me how you're logging into your system to export occupancy data. Could we ingest that differently? So I think that is common for maybe a marketer to say hey, I don't like this vendor's reporting, but really show them examples of what you do like to see if they can meet your expectations. Because if you're not giving them visuals, it could be hard for them to conceptualize it. So I would say the visuals and real life examples really help the vendor kind of tailor that request to your needs.
Yeah, I'll say a lot of times people used to just talk to me in a vacuum about a kind of report that they love, and I would get all nervous because in my head it's like this magical unicorn thing.
Right.
And then they give it to me and I'm like, all right, well, this is like a CSV with a couple columns. I got no problemo. Felt like I built it up more in my head than it needed to be. All right, well, let's also hit what has your team done? I feel like in the beginning, and you can push back on this, but in the beginning it was well, we need to serve clients. We have a certain, it's not well defined, but we know that there's certain expectations that we have for ourselves for clients. But as time has gone on and your team has built out and become more robust, you guys have better defined whether it's SLAs, expectations, that's both internally and externally. And then as your team continues to grow to support more clients and frankly, also as we support different types of clients, you guys have put in a lot of work to get even, I don't want to say defined again, but just be more specific and thoughtful about how you're building the team. So just talk through some of that, what you guys are doing there and why.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a loaded question because I feel like there's 3 questions in one. And I think I could talk about the team structure for a bit. So maybe before team structure, I think the first part of your question was like, what have we done that maybe we didn't anticipate that we were going to do, or how our service levels have changed that we didn't start out with 3 years ago?
Yeah, well, I would say, like, obviously when we started the company, we weren't we were niche in the fact that we were saying we want to deal with apartments, but now I feel like we have a very clear type of customer that we know is going to be successful with our current system. And that's now been, I'll say, well orchestrated with your team. We can still take a couple things outside the box. So, right, like we do really well with companies that have centralized marketing teams, whether it's third party or owner operated. We do really well with companies that are above 10 properties in general, and where their average property is over 200 units in size. We know we don't do as well with companies who have, like, let's say 4 or 5 buildings, but they're like less than 60 units on average.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, we're not, the way we handle campaigns, do service levels, it can work, but there's a little bit more friction on each side because it's not our typical. We can color outside the lines a little bit if someone needs like a overall company campaign or third-party management lead generation style campaign. Our Roomba says it's hungry. Charge him later, DJ Roomba. But anyways, yeah, so there's a certain type of now well-defined type of client, right? Like we don't like to work with single family homes any longer. It's just doesn't fit as well into our system. And now that that's been defined, now you have more context. So I'll let you take it. Like how has service changed and how has that impacted team structure and how does that impact and why, like what you guys are doing moving forward?
Yeah. That's a different direction than I was going to go, but I think because we've done such a good job as a company narrowing down our perfect ideal client target market, whatever you want to call it, it's allowed us to put certain like services, workflows in place that are scalable. So I think we've identified a few like different ways that we can interact with clients that may apply to all clients versus when we were kind of trying to figure out like single family ownership groups, whatever that looked like. It was harder because we were basically reinventing the wheel each time. And now that we have more experience with exactly how those kind of mid-sized companies work, we can put in workflows that really help them, but also help us be more efficient as a team.
Such as?
A good example of that would be, I want to call out Mark here, but Mark has done a great job of creating like custom spreadsheets for his clients. And we're going to try and take that and now replicate that across each AM. So what he's done is like basically build a spreadsheet that has all of his properties data on it, all of the marketing data, occupancy data. He's got some formulas that basically spit out, here is my watch list properties. Here's the ones that we need to be concerned about. And that actually mirrors up to a report that the client pulls to say, okay, here's the properties I'm concerned about. Do those two match? And I think that's something that's perfect for a company that has 10 to 50 properties, right? Where it's one marketing team, it's not different marketing regions. And you can kind of take that and say, okay, this is now the basis and agenda for our weekly call.
Right. So they have certain success KPIs that they're looking at. Previously, we had access to our data and KPIs, but that may not line up with what the customer is like, what's hitting their hot list. And now what he's been able to do is let's show your KPIs, let's include it with our KPIs, and let's work off of one like centralized data doc, let's say, to help see that we're all looking at the same thing. Because our data points, as you said, are more leading indicators of like what their leads, close rate, that type of thing is going to be 60, 90 days down the line. Whereas their hot list properties are usually like, this week, we had this problem. And if we overreact by just looking at those or just looking at ours, it's problematic. Yeah.
I also think through that process, we've learned just to kind of anticipate certain questions from regionals. So as we now have all of this data on what questions our regionals basically hitting our marketing teams with that are then hitting us with, could we get in front of that and be more proactive and give them a playbook to say like, hey, here's FAQs, or here's, a spreadsheet that's going to help some of these questions that we've anticipated are going to come up from your regional team. Yeah. Here's how we get in front of it. And then we've taken that a step further. In some situations, we will join the marketing team and the regionals one-on-ones so that we can help kind of be that marketing expert for some of those.
So if I was listening, at first I would be scared when you're like, oh shoot, we have playbooks, in a way, because I'm like, now it's like I'm becoming a number. But what you just described is, how do we have a framework that can scale to different types of companies and sizes, but then remain somewhat flexible within that framework?
I was going to say, are you going to give me a shout out to Reed's flexibility within the framework? I think that was Reed's thing.
I brought that.
I feel like we've all adopted it.
Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's but I think it's important, right? Actually, we learned that from I think that was at one of the Google conference we went to. I think they used flexibility within the framework for the panel when people were talking about how to provide service at scale. Anyways, where I was going with that is, it's like, because the customer is choosing their KPIs, and then we're also layering our tried and true KPIs and indicators on top of that, and then showing how they correlate with most.
Yeah, same thing with our paid media team. So Adam's done a really great job of basically having different optimization strategies for different KPIs. So if we know a client really, really cares more about like website conversions and form fills on the website than form fills, we have a different playbook for that versus someone who really wants phone calls. So really knowing what those levers we can pull that are scalable has helped us, I think, provide better service.
Cool. Well, I like it. So that's how maybe service has changed from 3 years ago to today, and what you guys are working on. Do you want to go into team structure, or do you want to instead just talk about what does the future hold? Like when you say innovating at the beginning, innovating within the space, which you said, like, there's 30,000 marketing companies that your team is effectively competing with, being to the front lines of the company. What does that mean, innovating in the space?
Yeah, I think what we didn't talk too much about, but that really is kind of the direction we're going, is just data and technology. So what you'll get from us that you probably won't get from other comparable vendors in the space is really how we're using data and tech to scale our services, whether that's obviously Fiona. We're going to get into more like automated push notifications on the Fiona side of things. Basically, my team is trying to innovate on what reporting we can provide with Fiona data, with client data. So you'll see more from us, kind of holistic, robust reporting that's not just siloed by service. So I think that's going to be a great client experience. But I think at the base, data and technology is going to be what pushes us forward.
Yeah, I know. You talk a lot about context too. So there's a big back to not core values, but like what sets your team apart typically is, we say we get what you do, right? Because like your team really tries to become students of the industry to show just so that they can start to speak the right language, right? Because if I know for your team, you often expect 3 to 6 months when you hire a new team member for them to learn all the lingo. Even if you have someone that came from another agency tech company or whatever that knows digital marketing really well, they can't just jump in.
Right.
That's not easy, because what your expectations are is that your team members can speak just more, almost better about how the business of property management works than their own clients.
Right. Yeah. So I think really continuing to try to be the experts and students of the industry. I mean, another one of our core values that will hit, or that I'll hit here, is just humility. So admitting that we don't know everything, we're never going to know everything, but we're trying to learn as much as we can. I think if you're not learning, you're not growing. So yes, hiring people that either come from the industry and we need to teach them digital marketing, or they come from digital marketing, we need to teach them the industry, is a huge initiative for us. But then also, how are we bettering ourselves? So even today, there's a new player in the space around short-term leasing and luxury rentals. So it's like, I hadn't heard about them. So like, all of these companies are popping up. How are we going to be the experts on all of them? So constantly learning and trying to just connect the dots for our clients.
Right. Well, I'll just give an example, but 2 years ago, I don't remember our company using the term NOI. Right. But now that whoever learned NOI, we brought it to the company and said, okay, well, this is something we need to start orienting around, because it's not really as important to get number of leads, quality of lead, but it's really like, what's the return on this? And so, yeah, hopefully that's what I mean by client experience being the experts. And most folks that we talk to when they first come on as clients are often just concerned about just number of leads they're getting. And now your team is trying to provide context of like, well, what's a good number of leads? But then like, what do you really care about? Your owner really cares about the NOI more than they care about how many leads they're getting. Right. Typically, that's what matters at the end of the day.
Yep.
Anything else that you want to hit on with like, at least like around the innovation like of client experience within apartments?
Well, I guess I'll tease team growth since we didn't really get to that. But I think this is kind of where we're going as a company as we grow, is to really have more specialized positions. So on my team, that means like strategic account managers, really building out growth paths, obviously for our team, but also how is that going to impact our current clients? So giving them more than one touch point, having people that are solely focused on strategy, I think is going to really help also like push the needle forward.
Right. So not to make it sound like an infomercial for Digible, but what I would take away if I'm someone listening to this and I'm working with other vendors, I might use some of what you just talked about to help set expectations with them about like, here's what I'm now expecting from service. It's like, I expect a 24-hour turnaround time from you, right? Or like, I expect you to tell me, like, give me context around the data points. Like, I don't want to just have you tell me about click-through rate. I basically don't give a rat's ass about click-through rate. What I care about is like, why do I want a good click-through rate? It's going to get down to the number of leads, quality of lead, and effectively the return on investment. And if I'm working with another vendor that can't do that, I would be pushing them to say like, well, you got to up your game, because no longer is it acceptable to just like live on impressions or click-through rate anymore. And then beyond that, I would also be asking my vendor, I would be hitting them with questions around like, what are their plans for growth? Like if I'm someone that's testing a new vendor or even have a current vendor, but I'm at a company that's growing, right? So like there's a new company that came to us recently that said like, we're going, we're like 60 properties now, but we're looking to be 120 properties in the next 2 years. Well, I would say, I would be asking about like, well, what's your support structure look like today versus like, if we grow to 100, 120 properties in the next 2 years, how are you going to react? How is service going to change? Because we've all experienced that, like with our own vendors, right? Where it's like they're good for us when we're at a certain size, but as we grow, they leave the same amount of support on us no matter what, even though like our billing amount to them has changed. Our needs.
Like, so how are you going to hire to get in front of the growth? But then also, what does that ramp up period look like? I think that's something we're super transparent with clients about, where it's like, hey, right now we have 3 people that are dedicated to your account. As we have seen X amount of growth month over month, we are hiring to get in front of, an October 1st hire basically. And that's what here's what that's going to look like. So giving them more information. And then hitting on your point on property growth is what is important to you. So again, being transparent with your vendors on KPIs, but then also give them like a tailored approach. So I'm sure you'll have different KPIs by ownership group. So maybe this ownership group really cares about website traffic. This ownership group really cares about total leads. Being transparent with your vendor, because we know, like working with our clients, it's not a one size fits all for all your properties. It's going to be different based on your, regionals, your ownership groups, and what's important to them.
Yeah, I think I love that point, because most third-party managers are working with many different owners, and each of those have different expectations. And as a corporate team, you're probably trying to standardize what you can, but we know that not all owners will put up with that, and they kind of have their own way to do it. So the more that you can just get in front of it with your own vendor, the easier it's going to be on everybody.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I know we hit more than an hour, but we still didn't get to everything in your notes, so we'll definitely have some additional follow-ups, but I thought this was great.
Yeah. Fun combo.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe what we should do, Lucy's snoring. Maybe we should just like
perks of working from home.
Yeah. Maybe we should just like turn DJ Roomba on and see if it can run her over. Cause I know she has a real hate relationship with Roomba.
Oh, then she'll start attacking Roomba. It's going to be a thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Nicole.
All right. See ya.